What is up, everyone? I'm Jeff London. This is the Mediocre Alaskan Podcast. There are experts, there are self-proclaimed experts, and there are dudes like me. Make sure you check out the MediocreAlaskan.com for content, columns, and stuff in addition to the podcast here. Look at I have some of the best episodes done if you're looking for adventure advice from people who have done some cool things like do-it-yourself stuff in the interior for caribou or on moose. You go to the MediocreAlaskan.com. Check out the Adventures tab on the front page there, and you can scroll down and listen to some of the best of stuff. There's also a packing list for a caribou float, from a guy in Fairbanks, Steve Shannon, who does that. So check that out. Today it's raining in Ketchikan, and it's been like 6 weeks of a drought that we've had, which is kind of weird. You don't think of droughts during the winter, especially in Alaska, but we haven't had much precipitation at all. We had snow the entire time, but it was the same batch from 2-3 weeks ago, and it just got really stale because it's beautiful and sunny, cold. So we are currently running on diesel power, which is a lot of Southeast Alaska actually is running on diesel power now, which is not ideal because we have hydroelectric plants, but because there's so little water in the lakes and the reservoirs that they're not being able to get the hydroelectric plants producing enough energy, so we're on diesel, which leads to a whole bunch of different potential issues. With power, with how we get our power. The diesel generators are the backups, but now we're going to be running on them. I read that it was, they expect to be running on diesel power for the next 4 to 6 months, just because there's not enough hydroelectric power going on at this point, and hopefully we'll get some more rain to make things less dire. I wouldn't say dire, but pretty rough as they are. But then it goes into the whole conversation about the use of fossil fuels going forward, not specifically because of the Green New Deal that would be proposed. That would be an absolute, it would be terrible for the state of Alaska and for the logistics. It makes you wonder what exactly is reasonable. Obviously it would be great if we weren't dependent upon oil so much, if the state economy was not dependent on oil so much, if there were more renewable resource opportunities. I guess there have been some surveys that have been done in the Ketchikan area to see if there would be enough wind, if you could get some turbines up there that would be able to do that. They've also looked into using the tide. A lot of the money from that comes from federal subsidies, and so I don't know. We don't have those things. Going forward, is it practical, or is it going to be a really expensive thing? So where we feel better because we're not using diesel power, we're not using fossil fuels. However, we are paying for it because the government's subsidizing it and needs more money. Of course, there's a lot of things that we look for. We need to have a strong central government, and you can have a strong state government, but not a state government that's more powerful than the federal government, of course. But the federal government supplies so much money for so many things in all states. So when people talk about, Alaska being its own country, that's just crazy. That's crazy. Alaska is very dependent upon federal money for a whole bunch of different things, education, things like that. So, but it makes you wonder what point we can go to certain things, and why couldn't we do certain things? Is it past a point in which we could have converted a lot of our things to wind energy? And now it's such a political thing that you don't have people that are on one side that say, hey man, I'm on this side, but that's a good idea. It's looking out for things that confirm bias, or looking out that for your group of people, and you can't look into anything that could be on the other side because you're going to contradict yourself. You're going to be called a hypocrite. And then what we do is we just take all these good ideas and we take discussion and we turn it into yelling mobs, and that's unbelievably unhelpful. But there's nothing wrong with asking yourself questions, right? That should be the only way that we address these issues. And you find that sweet spot of acceptable contradiction, because there's always some really good argument that's in direct opposition to your worldview or what you believe politically, anything. depending on how you digest the information that you get, it's either going to reiterate your worldview or it's going to change it, and that's not a bad thing. Maybe you come about some information, you think it, you mull it over, and you think, well, that's a good point. I still believe what I believe, but that's a good thing to think of. We usually, if there's information that's been presented to us by someone who is looking to confirm our worldview or to reject it, we just take that information. We just either reject it or we embrace it. We're getting such small snippets that are put together by propagandists who want us to just confirm things. It's a tiny little passage from a speech that someone else did the work for, and they're providing all the context and all the meaning for us, so it's easier for us to figure out what's going on. But I'll give an example. There's California is in the mid of a ton of rain, and there's a lot of snow. So reservoirs are filling up quickly, which is a great thing, especially because California's been in droughts and then was out of a drought, and then there's been some lean years again. But in those drought years, when everyone wants water, needs water, there are propositions or people think about enlarging or increasing the capacity for some of the reservoirs. And it's so sad to see when the reservoir is at really low levels and they reveal like old towns, that were evacuated and that were, purposely flooded because they needed to meet the water needs from the people in the agriculture. Because California, there's so many people there that need water, but there's also so much agriculture that needs water. So it's way beyond. It uses way beyond its means, unbelievably beyond its means. So places like the Stanislaus River, I think it's New Melones, which is the reservoir that blocks up some of the Stanislaus River. And apparently there's some world-class rafting that is underwater because the canyon that held the rafting is now totally flooded. So you lose rafting. There's also some great rivers in the Lake Shasta area. You got the McCloud River, and the McCloud River is a world-famous river. There were strands of rainbow trout that were taken all around the world, because the McCloud rainbow is like a sacred rainbow trout. There used to be Chinook salmon that went all the way up there, and there used to be steelhead that used to go up there, but now, of course, they can't because they can't get past dam in Redding. I think there's the Kennewick Dam, and then there's Shasta. So if you increase the capacity for Lake Shasta, you're going to drown more of these legendary rivers, the Pitt River and the McCloud River and the Upper Sacramento River. So that's bad, right? As a fisherman, I want to fish as much as that beautiful water. It is beautiful water. I've fished the McCloud, and I did the vast majority of my best fly fishing moments in California have come on the Upper Sacramento River. And the Pitt River is a great river too. So if you flood more, you lose more of that river. And so as an angler, I think, well, that's bad. I would love to fish. There's a couple private areas on the McCloud River that I would love to fish one day. So I would like them to exist. However, when there's extreme water needs for California, how do I put trout habitat above water needs of agriculture and of people in California? There's a whole lot of extra details on both sides. I'm reducing it, but in general arguments, it would be great if the Shasta Dam did not exist, so you could have wild steelhead and Chinook salmon still going as far as the McCloud River. That would be awesome. But it's not practical. It's not reasonable at this point. And as a fly fisherman, I understand and I know this. This is, gosh, I would love to have great, pristine habitat, but at the same time, California needs water. That's where they're at. Also, as an angler, fly fishermen tend to be viewed sometimes as like the pretentious conservationist, because it's proper and it's almost too proper for some people's liking. That fly fishers think that they're better than other people, which we don't. But that's a perception. That's a stereotype. Whatever. But when you go to a river and best case scenario, you hook fish in by the mouth and then you let them go, there are people who would say you're torturing the fish. If you're going to catch a fish, catch it and eat it, right? Don't mess with it and put it back in the water. So, you kind of swish that around and you digest a little bit. And literally, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm catching and release fly fishing, which is totally legal. I'm using barbless hooks. I'm releasing the fish as gently as possible. But I can still absolutely see how someone could say that that is ridiculous, that in my brain I would justify that or reconcile that in a way that I feel good about. How can you feel good? I feel good. I feel good about it. I love fly fishing. I love dry fly fishing, and I will continue to do it, knowing that the opposition might call me these names for this. And I get it. Totally get it. Totally get it. Same thing with hunting. I think the backlash when it comes to hunting is a little bit more. I'd say probably a lot more vicious, but at the same time, if we look at rates of depression and use of antidepressants, and we look at our current culture right now, and just how sad, depressed it is in many regards, and how many of the programs that are available to people to help them with feeling like there isn't necessarily a purpose or what's the point or something to make them feel alive again. Most of those programs involve some sort of trip to nature, right? It's advocated. Even I saw a commercial that talked about taking the bus to a park and going on kayaks in the park. If we know intellectually, and there's studies that have been done that there's medicinal qualities in nature, that if I want to take that to the next level and I want to feel extreme purpose in that I'm gathering my own food, I have to deal with that, and I have to cope with that. So why can't I, in a free country, do that? Right? Like, I totally understand and I get people who are advocating for things that are wrong morally with our country and ways that we can come together, but when it's people are trying to look at what's socially acceptable and push their morality on others, that's where I get a little bit, I'm just not sure about that, Like, there are things that I might disagree with, but because I don't really have much of a say in that. It's not my right to judge someone else for what they're doing, so, you know what? I disagree with that. I wouldn't do that, but, they have a point, So am I going to actively advocate for them not doing that? This is a free country, right? That's an unfortunate byproduct, maybe, I guess, of being in a free country, is that there's going to be so many people you disagree with. Can you imagine a country in which we all agreed on everything? That's terrifying, because by whose standards? Who is setting the standards, and by what moral principles are we living? We can't agree with those things, which is, again, one of the reasons why we have a lot of the problems, but also we have the freedom to individualize our moral compass, our way of going about things. That's going to happen. We're going to disagree with people. But I just don't understand why people want to go out of their way to be upset about things that they can't control or don't understand. I try to be as quiet as possible on things like you read a snippet of, and it just seems like it makes absolutely zero sense, but I don't know. Like, it's the border wall thing. Is it safety theater? Is it not? I don't know. I'm not down. I don't live down there. And it's a huge area too. Like, is the part of the border in Texas might be way different than a part of the border 100 miles from that same border in Texas. We're talking about a massive amount of space. And so, is there a crisis? Is there not? I don't know. I haven't seen it. So for me to be really passionate about what I want my country to do, well, I'm functioning without the facts because I haven't seen it. I'm trusting what other people are telling me about that. And if I get super, super passionate about that, super angry, super whatever, then I'm setting myself up for a massive contradiction. And if I do set myself up for a massive contradiction, and someone then provides information that is contrary to what I thought, it's my duty then, well, it should be, maybe, in my moral world, to at least digest the information that's given to me and then think forward, rather than just we're in this zone now of we got to accept these altered realities. If I don't like it, I can just say it's fake, or it's, and it's not just, I hate the term fake news, because it's emboldened us to live in that alternate universe, in that alternate. We don't have to accept some sort of reality. And then what is reality? And it happened a long time before President Trump started using the term fake news, right? I mean, we've lived in our own little cocoons in which we only get bits of information from people who don't really know what they're talking about, and we're taking that as first account evidence, and that's really not good.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
You see it a lot with people trying to govern Alaska by down south standards. And I know I've talked about this a lot, but I know that there's some people who don't listen to every single episode. So if this happens to be the first episode that you're listening to, there's a lot of stuff, and there are people who believe it's the right thing, and so I invite people who disagree to ask questions and experience things, rather than just say, hey, you're wrong. I invite you to, if you want to look at Alaska and fight on behalf of Alaska based on what you know about wolves in California or in Wyoming or Colorado or some of these or urban settings. You live in Massachusetts. I invite you to just take a look at the terrain of Southeast Alaska, specifically Prince of Wales Island, because that's where a lot of the wolf protections are happening, where a lot of money is going to it. And even if they would be happy to know that even if trappers tried, and I know some trappers who are some very skilled trappers, I have zero faith that they could eradicate wolves from this island. It's the third largest island in the United States. It has very little road access comparatively. There are a lot of logging roads that you can get on, but the vast majority of it, when guys go trapping, they access areas that aren't available to the road. They drive somewhere and then they use a skiff. And the lower third of the island has no roads on it at all. So if you are in favor of wolves surviving and living, you should love that. You should love that based on the terrain, the absolute suffocatingly thick forest of Prince of Wales Island, you should know that a wolf population will exist there. It's not gridded out. It's not the same thing when you look at Wyoming or you look at Colorado or Yellowstone. And you can Google Earth and you can see lines and terrain. Google Earth, Prince of Wales Island. Take a look at all that green, and you might get upset and frustrated when you're looking at the clear cuts and how ugly they look. But also know that someone who cut down those trees, they're feeding their family with it. So while you might morally feel that it's morally wrong to cut down trees and that someone should just find another job, well, why should they just have to find another job? There's a market for trees, and they're cutting down trees and they're feeding their families. it kind of baffles me. And so I would invite people to look at all aspects of some of these issues. Um, there are the most emotional cases, of course, and that's what people want to evoke emotion, because then when you're dealing with emotion and you're upset, you're frustrated, you're less likely to fall victim to facts and reason. You're emboldened, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're upset, you've been called a name, so you want to be defensive. And there's a lot of issues that I've thought about, and again, I'm not saying that I'm anything special, but one of the reasons why I'm not totally outspoken is because there are so many things that are so complex. I can't possibly get to the point where I am so upset I'm saying this side is clearly right and this side is clearly wrong. I think a lot of us, and because we don't want to be in the yelling mob, I think a lot of reasonable people in both camps on both sides, in the middle, I think they aren't compelled to share as much because they don't want to be added to the far right and the far left. They don't want to be added to the ranks of that team. They don't want to also appear to maybe be on one of the other teams and then get chastised by someone else, which it's not fair. Like, why are we looking at other people for you're on our side or you're not? Right? There's no middle ground. Like, what in life is that clear cut? Like, everything is complex. So I'd encourage people to look into some of these things going forward, and it's I don't want to sound super cynical, but it's hard to believe that we'll get anything really done, because things that would help would be a healthy back and forth. But then if you're trying to have some sort of nationwide consensus on anything, it's not going to work. You can't govern Alaska the way that you govern California. You can't govern Iowa the way you govern Oregon. The same sets of rules and normalizing everything. It just doesn't work. I was really curious about this because as a resident of Southeast Alaska, I know how important the ferries are for the communities. And so when the governor came out with the proposed cuts, which like people are theorizing would be a death knell to the Alaska Marine Highway. I tried to think, well, how can that be a good idea, right? Rather than what my reaction to that idea is. How might someone think that that is a good idea, or a reasonable idea, or a rational idea? So I started thinking about how spoiled we are in Southeast Alaska, and I'm not going to say if I agree or I don't agree. Obviously, it'd be nice to have. Like, I would say that I'm against the cutting of it, but what might be the reasoning for it? The vast majority of Alaska, like the overwhelmingly vast majority of Alaska communities in the bush, don't have any sort of state-funded access that I know of. Like, Southeast Alaska has the ferry system, and you have to pay for it, but it's state-run. If you're living out in the Bristol Bay area, you don't have that. If you're traveling for school trips in those areas, you're chartering planes, you're taking snow machines. So I guess we can't take snow machines because Southeast Alaska is a wide area, and our region's a massive area, and you can't snow machine over the ocean. But I kind of get that. Like, it is a luxury in Southeast Alaska. Is it a necessity? Probably, yeah. It's become a necessity. But there are parts of Alaska that don't have that, and they function. It is much more expensive. But I could maybe see how people could think that eliminating the Alaska Marine Highway, it would be to get rid of an expensive luxury that not all of Alaska has. Do I agree with that? Doubtful. I think at this point there's a reliance on that so much that far outweighs what other people have endured. And it's what you live with and what you're used to. And so Southeast Alaska is highly dependent upon the Alaska Marine Highway. And so adapting without it We got kids coming home from the Region 5 basketball tournament. What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with Music Fest when all the kids get on the ferry from all over Southeast Alaska and meet up in one area? And, like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to privatize that? I don't know. But I did wonder what it would be like if we didn't have one. Like, if we don't have one going forward, or we never had one, what would some of the memories I had on the ferries? You take it for granted. We're waiting for the boys and girls basketball teams to get back on the Alaska Airlines flight, and there's no bridge from the airport in Ketchikan to the city of Ketchikan, because that would have been deemed a bridge to no, or was being deemed a bridge to nowhere, because people, again, didn't understand. It just sounded better to call it a bridge to nowhere rather than take the time to understand and see the perspective of, hey, there's no bridge to the airport. Oh, that's too bad. Anyway, so there used to be 2 ferries that we run back and forth, but now it's just 1, so we're waiting for that. But you wonder, how people would adapt. Would they be able to adapt? I guess they have to, but some of these smaller communities, I don't know how they would survive. Because right now they survive with that service intact, and if you take that service from them, it changes everything. Rural communities who've never had, that state-funded, I don't want to call it a crutch, but and I don't want to call it a luxury. If they haven't had it, then they don't have it. They have to function without it. But in Southeast Alaska, it's vital. It's vital. And of all the places to cut, I don't know where else you cut, because if you don't cut it from there, you cut it from somewhere else, right? So if you don't cut the ferry system, then you're cutting more from education. How do you morally justify cutting either? And how do you justify functioning on a budget that is not even? Like, we're not balanced. So how do you get a balanced budget? Because we don't have, so, if like, you're thinking about your daily budget, right? If you're going to Starbucks and you're getting one of those $600 or 600 calorie $6 gut bombs, you can cut that out and you can save $6 a day, right? That's easy. That's totally frivolous spending. What about our state budget is frivolous? I don't know. And I'm hoping that if it is so tight that we have to make these sort of cuts, that, well, I guess good for us for not being incredibly frivolous, but, how do you make up that gap? If we do pay it through income taxes, I mean, is that just going to make things even more expensive? And are we're like, the people are going to be paying for it because it's through taxes, so we're paying for it. But man, I don't know. It's just so difficult. But it's such a complex issue. It's not super clear cut. Everything has a cause and effect. Saving the ferries means something, literally, to the people who need the ferry, want the ferry. But it also means going forward that somehow it's going to have to be funded. And what are we going to do about that? There is an effect. There's something that happens as a result of being reliant upon oil. There's something that happens when that oil price goes low. Right? There's a cause and effect to all these things. And what we do going forward, that it's complex. It is not super simple. And so I really hate it when the first knee-jerk reaction is a negative reaction. If you find that after thinking about the issue and getting information on the issue that you still feel exactly how you feel, then that's fine. But at least consider it from the other perspective, right? At least see the complexity of the world and everything. And sometimes that just leads or means you're going to be incredibly frustrated. But things are really complex, and it's unfortunate that we just find things to fight about going forward. But again, that's First Amendment, right? That's living in a free country. There's going to be always someone to fight with if you want to. If you don't want to fight, then you don't necessarily have to. But it's probably a good idea to be informed in some regard. So I'm definitely trying to become more informed on certain things. I things that make total sense to me. I don't understand how the opposite could make total sense to someone else. But knowing that it exists is actually it's kind of nice. It's kind of To know that someone else's brain is put together differently, it provides that uniqueness, and we still have uniqueness. And so the thing that's making me more motivated, I guess, going forward to be involved in these issues is the fear of us coming up with a nationwide solution for anything, a nationwide solution for thought, for philosophy, for things like that. Because anytime you take these ideas and you normalize them, then that's when it gets really scary. And that's when you have people that are creating their own facts. That's where you start having bigger issues. And I fear going forward, if we have this continued oversimplification of, you reduce an entire issue down to a cartoon that you agree with, or you reduce an entire, you judge history by contemporary standards, or you use and manipulate a group of people or even kids in cartoon illustrations that oversimplify things, that it's just gross. It's just gross. And there are times where I've seen things that I've totally agreed with, like, yeah, man, yeah, and I thought, well, that's not telling the whole story. But the nice thing is that I realize there's so many people who think. I'm not saying that I'm not unique at all. The nice thing about it is knowing that I'm not special at all. I have zero specialness, because there are a lot of people who are frustrated about and are talking about nuance and are questioning things, and that's why they're not so outspoken, because they don't feel that adding to the conversation it's not a conversation, the yelling back and forth online is going to help anything, because they are conflicted on the issues, and they don't want to be adept. So it's nice to see that, and it is encouraging in that regard. But who knows where the mobs are going to take us, man? The mobs on both sides that are failing to just to take the invitation to be invited to see what other people and how other people live, and just what great people there are on the other side. That if we knew them for not what they voted for, what they posted online, if we knew them, if we saw them at the store, you don't know who anybody is. You're just with them, right? But it's sad going forward that we try to apply some sort of stereotype and reduce things that are so simple. Or we go into things and we take an invitation, but we don't want to. We're determined to not have our minds changed, right? If you go into something and you're kind of hoping to change your mind, you're at least considering the information that you're there. You're digesting it, and if you come back on the backside and you haven't convinced yourself that you're wrong, then at least you tried, right? And then you now understand the other side's argument, and so you can better articulate your own, or you know better why you stand. Right? Well, why do you not like this person? Oh, because he's a what? Well, how do you know that they're that? Well, that's because I read this thing. You don't know. You don't know. You don't know why that. It's just easy to come to that conclusion. It's easy to call someone that. Yeah. So yeah, a little rant there on this here Sunday. But man, excited for spring coming up. Spring's gonna be good for us, but we'll see what happens going forward. Got spring bear hopefully in a couple weeks. And then I got a trip to Colorado next week. Gonna head to Laramie first, and down to Colorado. So it should be fun doing some backcountry skiing. We'll see how that goes. I know there's been a ton of snow down there, so hopefully we can get into where we're going. But new adventures, seeing things, and should be good. Make sure you check out the mediocrealasking.com, and we will talk to you next time.